All right, it's time to get under this dome and see what we've got. Now, one thing that I have to note, although you see me removing the lights here, is that for a few days my timer was not working properly and the lights weren't coming on. And although light is not necessary for a seed to germinate, it's certainly important once they do. And you can see here actually just what I feared. These seedlings in just a few days have become quite pale and they're very leggy. That means they're long and they're reaching out for that window light. That's not great, but it's also not something that I'm worried about. These seedlings are very resilient and we can fix this problem. I'll show you how here shortly. Now remember, whenever your seeds sprout, we want to get them out from under the dome as quickly as possible. It's important that we, A, get them some air circulation, because being under that dome and the moisture increases the risk that you'll have a disease of some sort. And that is called tamping off, when the stems get very, very narrow, and eventually these beautiful little seedlings all die a painful death, and that's not what we want. Likewise, ultimately these things are going to go in our garden, so we want to prepare them for the garden by simulating that environment as closely as we can. That means some fluctuations in light, some fluctuations in temperature, and certainly wind, which actually allows the cells of the stem to lengthen and shorten. And it will make for a sturdier plant that won't be so distressed when you put it out in the windy conditions of the real world. Now remember, we actually picked this seed tray specifically because it was easy to break apart. Whenever you plant peppers and tomatoes together, almost invariably your peppers will come up later than your tomato seeds germinate. We'll leave our peppers and what tomatoes haven't germinated yet under the dome, and we'll move those that have sprouted out. You know, they say there's only two things that money can't buy, and that's true love and homegrown tomatoes. All right. Once we've done that, we can put the dome back over those that haven't germinated, leave them here on the heat pad, and we can tend to these leggy seedlings. That pale green color is because they've not gotten enough light from the window, so we want to get them under these direct lights. Now, I like to have them both with sunlight and under these lights, so that they grow up to the strength of the more pervasive light overhead, but they also get some of that full spectrum from the sunlight because I'm fortunate enough to have a south-facing window. Okay, you can see here that the seedlings are reaching out towards that window. It's because these lights weren't working. But now that we have these pervasive overhead lights, these things are going to grow straight up towards it. But because they started out life reaching to one side, we're just going to rotate them here. That means they'll try and reach back out the other way. This is what you would do if you're going in a windowsill without overhead light. You'd rotate them every so often. Now, what did I talk about before? We need a little bit of wind simulation. So let's get the fan set up on these seedlings. Remember now, this fan is going to do a few things. It's going to strengthen those stems as those cells lengthen and shorten along the stem. You can see how after just a few days, these guys are already growing up towards the light, and the stems are already getting much sturdier, and the plant's looking much healthier. They've developed their true leaves. Now, one thing to consider is that without the dome keeping the moisture in and the fan moving air constantly over the surface of the soil, it's going to dry out a lot more quickly. You can already see the edges around some of these cells starting to become dry. Likewise, the wind stimulates the process of transpiration in these seedlings. That's the process by which plants expel moisture from their leaves. So long story short, we're going to need to water them more frequently. Okay, let's take a look at some of these. We planted several seeds in each cell to make sure we had a good germination rate. You can see here, we put 5 in, we got 5 up. That's no problem. I'd rather have too many than too few. So we're going to come in here and we're going to pick the ones that we want. I like some of these here that have their true leaves already in the center of the cell. I'm just going to go with a pair of scissors and I'm going to trim out the ones that I don't need. All right, I'm just going to leave these two. And ultimately, this cell will only have one. But again, a little bit of redundancy never hurts, so I'm going to leave two in here just to make sure one of them grows up nice and healthy. Why do I cut them instead of pulling them? Well, I just don't like to disturb the root system because they're growing so close together. One quick note as well, you can see here some of these leaves are still tied up in the seed. Let that fall off naturally. Try not to pick it off. Now you can see how leggy this has become. See how those tiny hairs off the stem there? Each one of those hairs, if it comes in contact with moisture and soil, is actually going to grow into a root. That's one of the beautiful things about tomatoes. So all I'm going to do is kind of dig a little hole, push this seedling down in there, and push it deeper into the tray. Compact that soil a little bit around it, and push all of the rest of this soil up around the stem. Now you can see that shortens it so it doesn't get out of hand and grow out of the cell. And now that we've got it under wind, or at least simulated wind in the fan, it'll grow up to be nice and sturdy. All right, that should be that for today. We're going to keep these guys watered. We're going to keep them under light 12 to 14 hours a day. We're going to check on them every day, basically, see how they come along.